There was a great study looking at people living the good life, people who had pretty much everything, all the money, they had all the best vacations. And they looked at their immune system markers and they found they were terrible. These were people who were going to be perfect candidates for a heart attack, degenerative diseases. These guys were going to be dropping like flies. The other group they looked at were people who were not as affluent, but were living a life of service. And these people live forever. So here's what I came away thinking about this. We get involved a lot with the whole idea of the self-help movement. Self-help, it's all about self-help. I started thinking about that whole concept of self-help as maybe being a little toxic.
Welcome to Big Energy. I'm your host, Kassi Underwood, here to give you a dose of that good energy and talk with people who do it best. Each week, I bring you the knowledge we need to be the forces of nature we came here to be.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. I'm so glad that you're here.
I am thrilled to be here with you, Kassi.
It is such a pleasure. I am so excited about everything that you're about to teach. For those who don't know you, I feel like I'm about to blast them with a lot of wisdom and a lot of truth. So I'm just deeply grateful for your time. So everybody, this is Lynn McTaggart. Lynn is an award-winning journalist and the author of 7 books, including her latest, The Power of 8, and the worldwide bestsellers, The Field, The Intention Experiment, and The Bond, all considered seminal books of the new science and now translated into 30 languages. Lynn has been referred over the years as a metaphysical rock star, the Madonna of the quantum world, which is my favorite one.
Oh, that I had her hair.
You have her heart and her spirit. Okay, so the Malcolm Gladwell of the new science, and even the Dalai Mama, yes. She is consistently voted one of the world's top 100 spiritual leaders for her groundbreaking work with consciousness and the power of intention. And she's chiefly known for the quality of her writing and in-depth research. She's also architect of the Intention Experiment, a global laboratory involving thousands of readers around the world testing the power of group thoughts to heal the world. Lynn, her books, and the web-based experiment were prominently featured in Dan Brown's book, The Lost Symbol, and Brown even created a character partly based on her. As co-founder and editor of the world's #1 health magazine, What Doctors Don't Tell You, now published in 14 countries worldwide, Lynn is a tireless campaigner for consumer rights and healthcare. Most recently, she has discovered the power of 8 phenomenon, the fact that intention magnifies and rebounds in a small group, which is presently being studied by a major university. Lynn has won a number of international press awards, including the New York Women's Press Club Award of Merit, presented to 1 journalist per year for a story involving personal risk, and a London Times Business Press Award, Columnist of the Year. She's been awarded Spiritual Writer of the Year and Science Book of the Year for The Bond. In 2015, her company was named Ethical Business of the Year. A member of both the Transformational Leadership Council and the Evolutionary Leadership Council, Lynn has been a featured speaker in a host of movies, including What the Bleep, Down the Rabbit Hole, The Living Matrix, I Am, and The Abundance Factor. Lynn lives in London with her husband of more than 25 years, journalist and author Brian Hubbard, author of the groundbreaking Untrue Story of You. They work side by side in their company and together have raised 2 grown daughters, 3 publishing companies, and 1 recalcitrant Cavalier King Charles Spaniel.
He was so naughty. He's passed on, but he was a very naughty little dog.
Naughty little doggy. That makes me smile. So I know Lynn as a master manifestor and guide and a healer and a truth teller. I've just learned massive amounts from you. We're in a small group together, and I've just learned so much from you over the past year. Let's begin with the power of intention. because I've seen you do this work and it's really masterful and incredible. First of all, how would you define intention?
Okay. Great start, Kassi, because most people think of intention as like a power thought. So you get up in the morning, you're doing your meditation, you have your power thought, and that's pretty much all the universe hears, and most people figure, well, that's it. I set out my intention and the universe will hear my request. But, you're intending all the time. With every thought you have, you're intending. And most of the time, those thoughts are pretty incoherent. But all of that stuff, all of those judgments you hold, all of that flotsam and jetsam that rattles around in your head, every last mendacious thought you have, that is an intention. And together, that becomes your life's intention. So what I mean about intention when I teach it is all about learning how to have coherent thoughts where you're intending for what you really want all the time. And you aren't allowing that still small voice to undermine you all the time. And what we mean by intention is just this. The new science shows that our thoughts are not locked inside our head, but they're trespassers that can go out there and affect other people and things. And I now know this because I've run 34 international intention experiments trying to change everything from making seeds grow faster to purifying water to lowering violence in war-torn areas to healing somebody of post-traumatic stress disorder. And of those 34 experiments, 30 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. So we know from that and loads of other science that thoughts are not only things, but thoughts are things that affect other things.
That is so incredibly powerful. And especially where we are right now with the pandemic and people really battling the way that they're thinking and becoming present to it because they're not having the distraction of being able to run around and pretend like they're not aware of what's going on inside of their heads. I just want to say for everybody, I see Lynn fully embodying this. Like you are honestly one of the most positive people I've ever encountered. I've seen you go through things and your mindset was rock solid. So how do you do that?
I don't know. I guess because I know that I'm broadcasting 24/7 and I've seen the problems of people. I've taught thousands of people how to do intention. And I run master classes, I run beginners class, foundation classes, and I've seen what happens and how people sabotage themselves. And that's so easy to do. But I've also seen the power of focusing and intending to do something, following through with it, and also miracles. I mean, I've seen it produce miracles. I oftentimes put people in little groups and have them do intention when I'm speaking. Not long ago, I had a woman who was in my audience. I had people do these, what I call power of 8 groups, small groups doing intention. She was in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the neck down, a young woman. And it was really tragic because she was a dancer. And so her little group did an intention for her, like everybody else in the whole audience was doing these intentions for someone in the group. And afterward, as I always do, I ask people in the audience, okay, anyone have a story to tell about what just happened to you? And she got up out of her wheelchair and turned around and talked to the audience, something she had not been able to do for months. So that is routine. It happens all the time. I see how miraculous it is. So it's, for me, not possible to not believe in miracles anymore. It's not possible for me to not realize that my thoughts are affecting everything. And as you know, Kassi, I just had an experience in the hospital. I had to have a hip operation in March. I really didn't want this operation, but it was really affecting my walking. I really had to have it. So I went in determined that I was just going to be positive about this. And I was there a whole week and I was cheery with all the nurses and I saw how amazing they were. And it just gave me such positivity that the most extraordinary thing happened, I think, because of that and the intentions that I saw with my groups intending for me. I had no pain. It's one of the 10 most painful operations. And I had it on both sides of me, and I had absolutely no pain. I had to take Tylenol for about 10 days, and that was it. No opiates, nothing. And I just saw, as I always see, the miraculous power of your ability to focus, that power we all have inside of us. It's also something that's been shown to me through these Power of Eight groups by accident. And I sort of feel like the gatekeeper, Kassi. I feel like this was shown to me, and I was given this responsibility to show this to other people. And so I better damn well practice it myself.
I hear that. And I saw you go through that, and just your spirits were so high the entire time. And when you came back and just needed Tylenol, I mean, mind-blowing. Yeah,
It was. And now 4 months later, I'm doing 5-mile walks and heavy-duty Pilates and all of this sort of heavy-duty exercise. And I have people in the office who are half my age, and I was showing them how I can do one-legged squats now, and they couldn't. I was really fascinated by the whole experience. But it's not only a mindset. There's an art and science to it. I mean, that was the other thing that I learned in researching this, is that, everyone has this innate power, but you need to learn how to use it. It's like Buddhist monks or Qigong masters or master healers. They all have certain techniques that they use that are just specific to their modality, but there are also certain commonalities that all of these traditions use. And that's what I tried to put together with the intention experiment. I tried to distill all of those and the science into common practices that everybody can learn.
So if somebody wants to learn these, they need to go and look at the intention experiment. Right?
Yeah, or they can learn with me. I mean, I run courses. They can check my website, lynnmctaggart.com. But there is an art and science to it. What's so interesting for me is people come from different disciplines, and all of those different disciplines use a variety of techniques, and they all have validity. Different things work independently. But one thing I've noticed that people get wrong with intention is oftentimes they're just not focused enough. They're not specific enough. They just don't tell the universe what they want. They will say, in a sense, will you decide? What I have found to be true over and over with the thousands of people I've worked with is that the more specific they are, the better.
So can you give us an example? Let's say that someone wants to manifest a certain amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us an example of a mistake that somebody would be making and then how to actually do it?
Oh, I have a great mistake.
Okay.
Because this happens all the time. In one of my classes, master class, I put people into groups for a whole year. Oftentimes they'll say something like, well, we all wanted to intend to win the lottery, okay? And I say, well, is that what you need? Do you need $30 million? And they'll say, no, John needs $12,000 to put it for a down payment for a car, and Joan needs $20,000 for her child's schooling. So, and I say, oh, so you don't need 30 million, you need 50,000 or something. And why don't you intend separately for each of those people in turn and intend what they need? And that's what I find all of the time. People intend for some nebulous figure. And in my experience, the universe gives you what you need. If you need $395.32, that's what the universe will somehow give you. I have so many cases. I had one woman down to her last 200 pounds. She was UK. And her group intended for her to have the money she needed to start this new business she wanted. And all of a sudden, this windfall comes. She had worked for Lloyd's of London at one point, and they sent her an invitation to apply for a special grant from them. And she did, and she got it. And she got the money she needed. I've seen that with somebody else who overspent on a vacation about $2,000 and suddenly got a message from a hotel saying she'd overpaid by $2,000. It's amazing, but it's is what happens. So I always tell people, intend for just what you need. But there's another really important point here, Kassi, which is a lot of times people get stuck. Mm-hmm. And they're intending, particularly people in the Power of 8 group. And I call it Power of 8 only because I discovered it by accident one day, just trying to figure out how to run a workshop, doing small group intention. And I said, I don't know, I'll put people in groups of 8 or so and have them send intention to a member of the group with a health challenge. And my husband is a great headline writer. And he goes, I love it, the Power of 8. And that's how it started. Total accident. We put people in groups of 8 in this first workshop back in 2008, expected it to be a mild effect, had a member of the group with a health challenge nominate themselves, rest of the group sent intention to that person. We figured it was going to be like getting a facial, mild feel-good effect. But that's not what happened. We had people marching in the next day after this experience saying things like, I have migraines every day of my life and they're gone. I have very bad knee arthritis and I can walk normally again. I have terrible stomach problems and they're solved. I have cataracts and they're 80% better, and on and on and on. So this was discovered essentially by accident, but we've been doing it ever since. And I have found that sometimes people in these groups will have the group intend for them on something and it just isn't happening. And it happened like this with a woman called Andy. And Andy was a young woman who was recently divorced, had 2 young children, and desperately needed a new job. So we had intended for her and her group intended for her and nothing. And she was very talented. She was a good coach. She had run a gift store before. She was very good at marketing. Nothing. So finally, I guess I just got fed up with her. And I just said, Andy, get off of yourself. Start intending for someone else, somebody else who's got a worse problem than you. So she did. And literally the next week, she gets a call out of the blue with somebody offering her her dream job. And truly, this happens every single time I see people intending for other people. When they're stuck, they get off of themselves with a really pure heart, really get connected in that group, and things start happening to them too. Some amazing rebound that goes on with this power of altruism.
So let's talk about this woman. And it sounds like she was kind of in like self-obsession mode with her intention. What were the metaphysics of her turning her attention toward someone else's intention?
Okay, great question. Well, I wanted to know this too, because this was the first batch of people I had put into groups for a year. And the hard-nosed investigative reporter in me always wants to figure out why. So I was actually studying all these people, trying to figure it out. When I looked at the science of altruism, it's amazing, Kassi. I mean, altruism is like a bulletproof vest for people. People who do things for other people, no matter how simple, helping your neighbor take out his garbage, for instance, they live longer, happier, healthier lives. It's just extraordinary. And I found that if you have an illness and you help somebody else with the same illness, you're more likely to be healed. There was a great study of a psychologist who was also a priest who wanted to see if prayer could help people with mental illness, because there's plenty of studies looking at prayer for physical illness. So he got hold of 400 people with clinical depression, put them into 2 groups. Now, one group get the prayer, and the other group gave the prayer. They were taught how to give the prayer. So in the end, they did all this studying on psychological parameters of the people who had got the prayer, and they did better. They were improved, but nowhere near as improved as the people who gave the prayer. Their improvements were off the charts. So the science really demonstrates that altruism is such an important piece here. Volunteers live longer, happier, healthier lives. There was a great study looking at people living the good life, people who had pretty much everything, all the money they had, all the best vacations, and they looked at their immune system markers and they found they were terrible. These were people who were going to be perfect candidates for a heart attack, degenerative diseases. These guys were going to be dropping like flies. The other group they looked at were people who were not as affluent, but were living a life of service. And these people live forever. So here's what I came away thinking about this. We get involved a lot with the whole idea of the self-help movement. Self-help, it's all about self-help. I started thinking about that whole concept of self-help as maybe being a little toxic, because I think that the real issue here is other help.
Yeah.
People get off of themselves. It has to be the real secret sauce here.
Thank you. Yes. I'm just so glad you said that. One thing that separates radical truth tellers from other self-helpy stuff is that we work with the metaphysics, but it's not that self-centered, like personal, individualized drive. It's a communal effort. It's using the power of intention to dismantle white supremacy. Like using the power of intention to really kick ass in the world for the benefit of all. I was wondering before the call, why the power of eight? Like I knew the story about the title, but why getting together in groups to do this work? And now that you're talking about the health benefits and the healthfulness of thinking of others. I mean, we know the emotional benefits of getting off of yourself and thinking about others. That's clear to me. And I do see people who come to me who've done all the self-help stuff and they're still depressed. It's because there's this level of self-obsession.
Absolutely. In my book, The Bond, I was trying to answer the whole Darwinian idea of survival of the fittest. And it was really clear looking at all the science that that whole concept was wrong. And Darwin actually separated himself from it toward the end of his life. It seemed to be the underpinning of everything in our society, that there just ain't enough out there, so you better damn well get there first. And I wondered if we were programmed to do that. And the science shows emphatically no. And one of the things that really impressed me was the need to belong. We need to belong almost more than we need to eat or have air. It's the most powerful thing. And if the most horrific punishment is to banish somebody, I mean, even suicides kill themselves, according to psychologists, because of what they call excessive individuation. They feel left out. And being left out is the thing we cannot bear. Community, small communities protect us from everything from heart disease to the common cold. So it started becoming apparent to me what was really powerful. I've somehow created a career out of my own enthusiasms. And this enthusiasm was actually born out of skepticism. I did not automatically believe in things like the law of attraction and manifestation. I really had to ask the more basic question, are we talking about very subtle effects like affecting a quantum particle, or are we talking about curing cancer with our thoughts? And also, what happens when lots of people are having the same thought at the same time? That's where my interest in community came about, is just trying to test the power of intention. Once I got into this, the more I got into it, the more I recognized that small communities are so important. They're so vital, and there's something so missing from ordinary experience. I mean, one of the things that's so exciting to me about my little Power of Eight groups, and they seem to be emerging all over the place. And when I also do my master classes and put people into groups, there are people who say, loads and loads of them saying, this is my intention family. I have people who've been meeting for years now, since they were put in this little group. And they say that, it's like we're all part of a unit now. We don't get to feel this too often, where somebody's got our back, particularly a total stranger. And most of these people have never even met these people in person. They've met over the internet, like we are doing now on Zoom. And yet these people have become their best friends. And you see how strengthening this is. Somebody's got your back. somebody is there for you. Somebody is sending in pure heart an intention for your well-being, and you get to do the same.
If you're a bad bitch who's ready to create a massive shift into abundance and ease around money, I've got good news for you. I officially reopened the doors to my popular program, Money Metaphysics for Maverick Women. It's a 6-month group program where you receive direct guidance from me, live calls, instant access to my 13-module course, Big Money Energy, plus a 2-day in-person retreat and tons of other live support and content. Learn more about the program at kassiunderwood.com/MMMW. Check it all out now and register at kassiunderwood.com/MMMW.
I feel like this brings us to an interesting question with you, because you are such a truth teller and a disruptor, and you're a journalist and someone who will really find the science behind what's going on in this world, including in areas that we don't like to talk about, like vaccines and even COVID-19 itself. So what I wanted to ask you, first of all, is this is something I struggle with too. Like, I wrote down the list of controversial things I believe, and it was just like a scroll. And I'm not saying as many of these in public as I probably should be. And so, like, how many people?
Oh, go ahead, Kassi.
I said, yeah. How many people do I want to alienate? How many followers do I want to lose? So what I want to know is, how do you reconcile knowing the science of the need to belong with being a disruptor? And when you're a disruptor, it is a polarizing lifestyle.
That's a great question. Well, I guess I'm an old school journalist more than anything else. You know, I grew up watching Woodward Bernstein take down a corrupt presidency. And that impressed me so much. I said, wow. And that was at a time when journalists were considered superheroes. And I thought, wow, what amazing responsibility and power. And that never left me, the responsibility part. I mean, I remember one time, my first book was about baby sellers. And I traveled around and went undercover. I even pretended I was pregnant and broke a big baby selling ring. It was really quite amazing. In the process of that, I remember one night staying up all night because I was writing about somebody who was patently doing unethical things. But I just didn't have the evidence. And I kept going over it and I kept going over it. And I had a researcher working with me, and she said, no, you know he's dirty. And I said, I can't prove this. And I also said to myself, one false move and you can destroy somebody's life. So that was really important to me. What this is all about is just this. I still take that very seriously, and particularly in this time where I don't feel there are too many good journalists left. You see in the newspaper, they've stopped knowing how to ask questions of government. They have now become the mouthpiece of government. And back when I was a young journalist, that was the last thing you did. I remember the Pentagon Papers, where an insider of the government leaked these papers about the government's illegal activities in the Vietnam War. He could have been killed, Daniel Ellsberg. And I saw all of this and I saw, yes, this is such important responsibility to be the fourth estate, to be the check on this power. And I don't see that anymore. So in my heart, with everything else I do, all the stuff I do on intention still beats the heart of that investigative journo. You know, I feel very strongly that that comes before almost anything. So yes, the idea of belonging is really important to me, it's essential to me. But also, truth-telling is really important to me. And for anything that I write or do, telling the truth is really utmost.
You're really wise about how and when and where to tell the truth as well, and have kind of a sense of who's ready to hear what, when the public is ready to hear this from certain people and that sort of thing. How do you discern when is the right time to tell the truth, and to whom?
I think when the truth needs to be told. I'm not so tactful about that, Kassi. I mean, many times I've waded into the current crises when I feel that there's something I don't agree with. For instance, I feel that we're really losing free speech now. And that is of huge concern to me, huge concern that people cannot express a different point of view without getting attacked. I talked about recently, I did some controversial blogs, and I don't mind, I don't care. I feel if there's something that I need to say, I will say it, as long as I do so in a responsible fashion and without demonizing people. But I felt it was important to say that some efforts these days in looking at some of the areas that we're concerned about, like white supremacy, are seeking to also rewrite some of the history. And what I wrote about was, look, history is always dirty. It's always a story of a victim and a victor. And when you don't tell the truth about history, I was looking at Japan, for instance. I read a story from a journalist who said growing up in Japan, her history books had one sentence about Hiroshima and nothing about something like 100,000 sex slaves that the Japanese soldiers had taken of the Chinese and nearby countries. And it was only when she went to Australia that she found this out. And it was tragic because that generation did not understand all the hostility of the Chinese toward Japan. Even when it's not pretty, I felt it's important to tell the unvarnished truth about what went on. And that can help us never do it again. So there have been things that I've talked about with that. I feel that now there's a cancel culture that I don't agree with, where people are attacking people because they have a different point of view. And as soon as you start cutting out that point of view, there lies madness and danger. We've been doing our health stuff for 30 years. And in that time, we used to be the other side of the story, where we'd be called on, to come on TV and be the other side of the story. And there would be a proper, decent, reasonable debate. And now you find that things are getting canceled and deleted from Facebook and social media if it is not the accepted point of view. And that is the government point of view. Now, these are really, really dangerous precedents. So I will stand up to that. I mean, our cover story this summer for our magazine is, will a COVID vaccine work? And we're asking the questions almost nobody else is asking.
So I want to go into this. This is really important. And this is a cover story for What Doctors Don't Tell You.
What Doctors Don't Tell You. Yeah, our magazine.
And this has been around for 30 years.
In some form. It was a newsletter to begin with, and since 2012, it's been an international magazine.
This is so cool because it really is kind of a natural emergence from your intention-making work. I don't even know if it came from that or if it kind of goes together with it, but I've seen you go through a surgery and not have to use hard painkillers or anything like that. I first just want to know how you got started on that journey.
Health came before intention.
Okay.
On health, I got ill when I was in my early 30s, and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. And I went from conventional doctor to the very outer rim of alternative stuff. And I learned something about my relationship with my mother, but I didn't get better. And so I finally realized that if I was going to get better, I was going to have to do this myself. So I was going to have to somehow research what I needed and find the doctor who would take care of me, or the practitioner. And so I researched what I thought I had. And back then, everybody knows about faulty microbiomes now, but nobody did back then. And so I figured out what I thought I might have. And I found a nutritional doctor, one of the really early integrative specialists over here in the UK. And together we worked to get me better using a non-drug approach. I was so impressed by our partnership. We were working together to get me better, and the whole nutritional approach that I probably got pretty boring on the subject. My husband finally said to me, "Don't tell me, tell the world." So we decided together to launch What Doctors Don't Tell You. And it was supposed to be not only looking at some of the unproven aspects of medicine and dangers, but also better alternatives. And we wanted to look at non-drug alternatives. So that's really how we started. It was really in trying to figure out why spiritual healing worked that I started talking to frontier physicists and consciousness researchers, because I kept thinking, if you can have a thought and make somebody better with it, well, that undermines everything we think about how the world works. So in researching that, after talking to all of these scientists, I realized that it wasn't a little simple thing that I was trespassing into. It was a completely new science, a new view of the world, and that ended up being my book, The Field. But with What Doctors Don't Tell You, we're very wedded to really top-level research, but putting it in, a user-friendly way so that just ordinary lay people can understand. Our copy editor has got a PhD from Imperial College, one of the biggest universities for science in the world, and one of the most prestigious, and she checks every last medical reference we've got in there. So we want to make sure it's okay, but we wade into very controversial subjects at times when needed, and we always look for better things. And more recently with COVID, we ask the questions that really, really need to be asked.
And what are these questions?
Well, we're all assuming certain things about the virus. We're all assuming that it is transmitted by face-to-face contact. There's a number of scientists saying, no, it lies dormant in everybody, and it just springs to life with certain conditions. Now, that needs to be investigated. Do face masks actually work in containing it? We've looked into that. The science is very mixed.
What is your view on the face masks?
Well, my view is that there's no solid evidence that they work. And the World Health Organization for months and months was saying, don't bother with them. And now there's been a lot of pressure from governments in order to get people out and to try to overcome fear, just put them on. And so, you have to think about it. To a virus, a face mask is like a basketball net filled with holes, and they can get through it really easily. So there might be a tiny bit of cutting down, but the science that we've looked at shows that it's very mixed. The bulk of evidence shows that they probably don't work that well. And so there's that to go through. There's these kinds of questions to ask. And also vaccination. We have to ask the big question. Right now in the papers, they're demonizing as lunatics and crazies anybody who just asks a basic question. And we all have to ask this question. We're not saying vaccines inherently are bad, but we have to ask, can you make a vaccine that will work? And will that vaccine be safe? And that is a question. If you're going to try to vaccinate 7 billion people, is a question worth asking, I would think.
And why would a vaccine not work?
I mean, vaccines work imperfectly. Mm-hmm. They're not inherently bad or good, but they work imperfectly. Some work much, much better than others. Some have good track records of working. Some have bad track records of working. Some have very few side effects. Some have loads, very serious side effects. So the questions you always have to ask with vaccines are, how necessary is this? How safe and how effective? And one of the problems with a flu vaccine is flu vaccines are pretty hit and miss. Even the CDC and the FDA admit that the flu vaccine works at best 35 to 40% of the time. That's it. One of the problems they've had is with these kinds of flu epidemics before, with SARS, with Zika, with swine flu, the vaccines not only haven't worked, but have had terrible side effects. And one of the side effects of one of them was to not only not work, but make catching that illness much, much worse for the person. Now, that's fact. It's been in studies. I'm not wearing a silver tin hat on. I'm not talking about crystals. I'm talking about scientific evidence.
Right.
And so these are things that have to be looked at. They're also trying to make this vaccine using some genetically engineered DNA, RNA. And so we had to ask, is that going to be safe? Must ask these kinds of questions before just assuming this is the Holy Grail. What I always suggest people do is don't buy into the received wisdom. Read the information, read the science about it, and then make up your own mind.
That's right. That's why I was so excited to talk to you about some of this medical information, because I know that you do the research. You will read the studies. And so few people do that, or they read one article on CNN or New York Times, wherever they read it, based on one study that's giving publicity to like one study when there's all these other studies on PubMed or wherever that have not been acknowledged, that are peer reviewed. I mean, they're good studies.
Yeah, and there are many, many doctors who are disagreeing with some of the things that are being proposed and put forward as finite truth. And I think it's really important to have these discussions back and forth, to look at the evidence and to, debate this in a healthy, democratic fashion. And I think that's what we're losing right now. I think people out there, it's really important, more important than ever, to bring this to light, because I feel we're experiencing another wave of McCarthyism. It used to be, are you or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party back in the 50s, when Joseph McCarthy was labeling all kinds of people communists until they realized that he was a complete fraud. Well, these days, we've got a similar kind of lockdown of open debate about things and different points of view. And I think it's really important for us to keep that.
I totally agree. And I also just want to emphasize the intellectual responsibility. So there's so much intellectual shaming of people who do ask the questions. When we're children, especially girls, we're intellectually shamed. And so when we start asking these questions as grown women and we get intellectually shamed again, we shut down. And so part of the work is really educating ourselves, doing the hard work, doing the research, and so that we're free to speak the truth that we find there.
Absolutely. I think that is so important. And it's so important to just stand up for things and ask the questions. One thing you asked me that really impressed me, and maybe about continuing to ask the questions. And when I was a really young journalist and I was first doing this baby selling thing, I had a mentor who was a much older and wiser journalist. And I remember trying to go and interview somebody who kept slamming the door in my face. And my mentor turned to me and he says, "They haven't said no until they kick you down the stairs." And that really stayed with me. I thought, yes. You've got to be that little warrior person and just go in and say, "They haven't said no yet. I'm going to go forward." And that has stayed with me.
I love that. One place we do this is on Instagram. That's become the public square. It's Instagram or Twitter, less so, but still, really finding the courage to post on Instagram is a huge thing for a lot of people that I work with, and to post their truth and be able to share that. And I think that that's right. Like you get the door slammed in your face sometimes, and that's okay. Not everybody has to like it. Not everybody has to agree with it. But they haven't said no until they kick you down the stairs.
Absolutely. And so do say your truth, because it's really important. And even if it's going to be unpopular, we had this one situation around 2013 with What Doctors Don't Tell You. We had a batch of skeptics who organized themselves in a really powerful fashion. And we're trying to get our magazine banned. And so they wrote to our distributors who get it to stores and had doctors working with them to say how terrible this magazine was. And they hid them in stores. They actually went around as a little posse, hiding them behind other magazines, and tried to ruin our SEO, our search engine optimization for our website and all kinds of things. They wrote to stores and succeeded in getting about 3 store chains to pull us from here. This is in the UK. And then they got a friendly journalist with the London Times to write some terrible thing about our magazine. I called up this attorney that I knew who was a top libel lawyer, and I said, they've libeled us, blah, 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 blah. And he said, well, what are you going to do? Sue Rupert Murdoch? Rupert Murdoch owns the London Times. And he says, his pockets are a little deeper than yours, Lynn. So don't sue him. Use it as a platform. Go and fight back. That was the thing to do. So instead of cowering, I'm just suggesting this as a way forward for people who get attacked on social media. We use social media to go back to that journalist and basically said, we looked at the Times story and said, they hadn't even bothered to interview us. You call that a story? Here's what I did for my story. Here's what you did for your story. And this totally rattled this journalist. So he started writing back on my social media. All my people started attacking him for his bad journalism. So they were on the total defensive. And we carried on doing that and kept talking about the silencing of different medical points of view, et cetera. So our readers took up the call and they started creating little memes of things like, one of the store chains was Tesco. And, our magazine is What Doctors Don't Tell You. And they had a picture with somebody with a mask saying, what Tesco won't sell you. And they started posting this all over the place. And then Tesco started getting rattled because they were boycotting the shops. So then Tesco started sending free vouchers to these readers, and the readers started ripping them up and sending them back. So upshot was we got back in the stores. The stores caved in because the readers had created kind of a movement and got together over this. We realized that our best response was not to cower and not to apologize, but to stand in our own truth and to fight back on things. And we finally discovered that the skeptic group were a group that were going around saying that sugar is okay for you. And we discovered that they were actually getting money, a lot of funding from Coca-Cola. So we created memes around that with the guy who ran it jumping out of a Coke bottle with lots of money in his hands, and just had a lot of fun with it. But they went away. They went away. I think the point is just really standing in your truth. Don't get cowered by the shame police on social media. And people who act righteous and are rude, just delete and ban them.
Yes, and have fun with it when you have to fight back. I love that. And I love that story. The times where I've actually had to fight back, those have been the moments where I've become more self-expressed. I've become more of a truth teller. So I love that story. There's nothing to fear. You can get attacked and fight back, and it's only going to make you a better, more free truth teller.
Oh, God, yeah. And the end of that story was having been attacked and taken out of all these stores. And by the way, the Times story then got picked up by a whole bunch of other press. And there was one TV show, they were holding my photo up saying, basically, burn this woman at the stake. Because we didn't shy away from it, we actually had little ads saying, we're banned now. And we ended up getting voted the most popular website, more than the UK's National Health Service, which was amazing, and Bupa. So it ended up being weirdly good publicity for us. And it also made us realize that we could survive any kind of attack like that by just standing in what we believed in, our truth, and fighting back, essentially.
Yes, it's such a powerful story. Thank you. I feel like my listeners are going to be so inspired by everything that you do and everything that you teach. Will you tell us where we can find you and what we have to look forward to with your work?
Sure. Thanks so much, Kassi. You can find me on lynnmctaggart.com. And you can see on there all the kinds of things we're doing. I'm also going to be running a great big intention experiment where we're going to focus on one of the areas of the most unrest going on with the big racial divide now. I'm going to be getting groups of people from different sides of the fence. So I want a group of African Americans and I want a group of policemen, as well as Democrats and Republicans intending together and coming together with this. We've done this before in Jerusalem, and we had Arabs and Israelis intending, and by the end of it, they were sending love to each other and doing all kinds of things. So that's my big project, and I'm working with a group called Uplift Connect.
Thank you so much, Lynn. You are amazing. I just respect your work so much. I'm so inspired by you, and I'm so grateful for your time today.
Oh, thank you, Kassi. It's been such a pleasure and lots of fun talking with you.
That was another episode of Big Energy with me, your host, Kassi Underwood. Were you into it? Go ahead and click the subscribe button and leave a review. You can also find me online at KassiUnderwood.com. See you next time. And remember, Money Metaphysics for Maverick Women, my 6-month program, is open for enrollment. Learn more and register at KassiUnderwood.com/MMMW.